So Central City Concern, we're a homeless service nonprofit but our biggest presence is in downtown Portland, but we also have stuff on the east side as well. We provide housing, employment services, and healthcare to folks experiencing homelessness or at high risk of homelessness. So we're a nonprofit, and we're trying to get, and actually, thanks to CSG Pro, we've gotten really serious about our use of data to help us make decisions and ultimately achieve the outcomes that we all want to see for people who are homeless in our community. So the tool that I'm going to show you today is a risk selector tool. One of the things, and it's specifically for our primary care services, and one of the important things to know about delivering healthcare services, that it's important to be able to match the right patients to the intervention. This is actually a thing that's probably more complicated than it seems like. And it's particularly complicated when you're dealing with people with complex sets of needs. And I'm very lucky to have some really awesome leaders in my organization who are always coming up with these new harebrained ideas about how we can totally transform everything and really change people's lives. But we need the ability to test this kind of thing on a small scale first, so we don't just jump off a cliff. And this tool is really about trying to help translate those creative ideas into small pilot projects and identifying small groups of people that we can test stuff on. So it's about right-sizing the pilot, identifying the right clients, and being able to do that on demand. And having this be a self-service tool for leaders, so they don't have to ask me every time they come up with some great idea and need to figure out where they can go test it. So the problem that this is trying to solve is we needed a flexible tool to identify high-risk patients by a variety of different things. Risk scores, recent hospital utilization, they're either showing up to primary care appointments or no showing to their primary care appointments. We want to be able to filter down, look at people by diagnosis, or even look at where they're living. All of these things are important for being able to identify just the right subset of folks so that we can try out something new. And that's a whole lot of stuff to get right. And I thought that I was going to have to build something really complex in order to make this happen. But it turns out I didn't. So I'm going to work backwards here. What I ended up with is a single view that I then built a Power BI tool on top of. And I just want to be totally transparent about how I arrived at the single view. It's sort of not true that it's just a single view, because it's actually built on top of a few other views. So I've got one where I pull together some data with client details, demographics, that sort of thing. I have one where I pull together all the patient's diagnoses, and another where I pull together and aggregate their utilization over the last 6 months. And that all feeds in to the main view. And that, of course, those views are based on other sets of data, so demographics.
Do you want to say what utilization is?
Yes, it'll be clearer in just a second. So client details, that's things like demographics, enrollments in our programs, and risk scores that we're sort of calculating independently. And then utilization, in this case, is hospital utilization, like going to the emergency room or getting hospitalized. In the Northwest, we've got actually a live feed of that information coming to us, which is great. And then also primary care appointments. So that all kind of fits under the heading of healthcare utilization.
So are these dependent SQL Server views that feed a single query, or are they multiple queries that produce a single table out of Power Query?
This is all done in SQL Server with tables and then tables that feed views.
Right.
I didn't end up doing any of this in Power Query, although I suppose I could have. I'm not sure why I chose to go the route that I did.
Well,
but that's the route that I went.
One of the issues for this organization and a lot of organizations is that they don't want their data persisting in the cloud, right? So part of what we do is we don't import typically into a Power BI tool, sensitive data about a health history of customers. So it's probably just ingrained in you that you should not import sensitive data into a Power BI tool.
That's right. So this is hitting the, what I'll show you will be hitting our data source live. So I just wanted to call out a few keys that I think make this tool successful. And honestly, one of it is that I'm using just a single metric. It's this distinct count metric. It means that I can kind of, I realized when I thought of kind of scoped out what this tool was going to look like, I didn't need to do anything complicated, so I did the least complicated thing I possibly could. And so by just using a distinct count on a single column in the table meant that it didn't really, the granularity of the table could be a little unconventional. I'm actually using multiple rows per client. It's actually 1 row per client per diagnosis. That concept doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect the distinct count metric, and it allows me to achieve the end result that I want. This particular view ended up being really easy to write. I think it took me all of about 5 minutes to figure out. It's been reasonably easy to optimize, although, as you'll see, it's not as fast as I would like, but it is much better than it was initially. I worked with one of my developers to add indexes to make it a little faster. And for better or for worse, it doesn't have any extra DAX. That pains me personally, but this is an example of how you can do something really simple that's still powerful. And I have to say that another thing that makes this all possible is that the heavy lifting was already done. We have this really rich data warehouse that CSG Pro has helped us build, and that means that the rest of my work is a whole lot easier. And we also have a bunch of risk algorithms that we've built in along the way. So I don't have to worry about calculating any sort of complicated metrics on the fly with DAX. That's all done behind the scenes and is sitting in the source data itself. So I will show you the tool.
So before you jump in there, I forgot to press screen.
Oh, we're all so close.
We missed all that?
No, we'll get that, don't you worry.
You're gonna have to sit through that again.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Right.
Well, let's give her a countdown.
3, 2, 1.
All right.
Okay, go.
Go.
Cool. All right.
So what I'm about to show you is our single view. I'm going to walk you through all of this because admittedly it is quite a lot on a single screen. So I don't move out of the camera, I'll use my cursor. So up at the top we have, as you can see, the single metric patient count. And everything else on here are just columns that I'm using filters or slicers on. So I've got our enrollment status, the care team that patients belong to, whether or not they're in housing, and some details about that. Then I have these columns here. We've got these pre-calculated risk scores that I won't bother going into, but they exist, which is cool, and it means I can use them now. And then I've got these pre-aggregated 6-month lookbacks of people's utilization of healthcare services. So whether or not they were admitted to the hospital and how many times, how many ED, emergency department admissions they've had, whether or not they've shown up for primary care appointments or whether they've missed them. And then a set of diagnoses. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of what this looks like so we can make sense out of the right side of the screen. So one of the things, this feels really relevant now, we're actually using this. We wanted to test a pilot project for people with lung disease like emphysema. They really struggle when it gets hot and they really struggle when it gets smoky. And we wanted to see what can we do for these folks. So one of the ideas was, let's get them air conditioners because we know that helps filter the air and keeping the temperature down in their apartments keeps them from going to the hospital. So let's focus on people with lung disease. Let's focus on people who have 10% risk or higher of being hospitalized. 10% doesn't sound high, but that's actually really high risk of going to the hospital. Let's focus on people who live in our housing. So, like I said, we provide housing, so we've got people who live in our own housing. And that seems like a pretty good place to start. It's going to take a second here. We've narrowed it down to 15 patients. That's a totally reasonable number of people to start a pilot intervention for. And I can see where they live. I have their name, who they are, who their primary care provider is. I've ranked them by their risk of hospitalization. So this becomes a work list for our outreach workers to say, all right, let's tackle this thing. We know we've got this heat wave that we're in the middle of. And this is something that's totally actionable for that set of outreach workers.
Putting an air conditioner is way cheaper than paying for an ER visit.
Yes, an ER visit, what is that, $1,500? If you get hospitalized, which a lot of these folks are at risk for, that's $15,000. We've been able to work it out with some of our insurance companies like Care Oregon. Every once in a while, they'll pony up the money for that air conditioner because they realize that's actually a really good investment. Everybody wins there. Let me clear my... I can't reset to default. All right.
You have to refresh to do it. Just refresh the browser, and then you might need to refresh the browser, not the data, and then the reset to default.
I wanted to give you one more example because it's fun to actually get to do this live. Oh, whatever. I can clear my own filters.
Ooh.
Hold on just a second.
How many rows are you operating against?
Yeah.
Approximately.
I think it's actually not that many. Probably about 100,000, 150,000. It's not many. It's
Must be the Esri.
it's the Esri doesn't help, and
it's direct query, isn't it?
it is direct
Yeah,
query.
okay.
And I've done the
That's
best to optimize the view, but it's not as fast as I would like. That's more my fault than anyone else's. So I had another example. We have this emergency department outreach pilot program that we wanted to test. And we're really, if you've spent any time in Old Town, you see lots of people who are struggling in a variety of ways. One of those ways is with opioid use. So I wanted to focus on people with opioid use or maybe a pain diagnosis, because sometimes those will go hand in hand. Focus on people who've already been to the emergency room 5 or more times, because past behavior is a good indicator of future behavior. Let's also focus on people who've missed a primary care appointment because maybe they're not getting something they need. And, let's specifically focus on people who are homeless. So,
Couch surfing is an option.
it is. Because that is one of those kind of weird in-between things that's kind of homeless, kind of not.
Does my daughter count then?
Potentially, yes. So for piloting on emergency department outreach efforts, this has narrowed it down to 27 patients. This is actionable. Of course, since these folks are homeless, I'm not sure that those locations mean a whole lot. But nonetheless, we've got the work list. And like I said, we received live notifications about emergency room visits. So when I see patient XXX at the top, I can actually, here's this notification I just received. I can go do something about it because I know they're in my kind of core population of folks I'm trying to reach out to. So that's really all I had to share with you. But I just think I hope you think it's cool. I think it's cool that a single view with one metric allows you to do some really cool stuff.
Well, I think it's really cool, but I also just wanted to highlight, because he's a little bit modest, he's got a really good design feel, right? And you see he made some really nice choices with the filters being in one place, and it is very intuitive to be going sort of left to right, and then this kind of balances itself. So a lot of the good rules that we know about design, he has plugged in here, and I just want to highlight that point. I haven't seen this tool. It's really cool.
And it's actually in
And
use
people are
too.
using it.
People actually use it, which makes me
great.
happy. Yeah.
Question. How do you mask the PI information? Do you use a parameter? Like for presentations, you obviously want to mask. I mean, that's a good use case, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, in this case, I took anything that is sensitive, and actually, in this particular view, I wrote in the SQL query XXXXX as, and so I created a fake column.
Okay.
There is a real version of this that includes real data with all the things that we would need to be able to reach out
You
to
sort of
somebody.
hacked into it.
Yeah, I was actually, I was all over Stack Overflow trying to figure out, is there a cool, I didn't
That'd be a
have
great
time for that.
suggestion to the Power BI team is for exactly that, for presentations. The ability to mask PI, or mask any field for that matter, but that would be a good.
Yeah.
Then
Toggle
masking
checks,
SQL Server
mask.
is an option. But you know what I love about this solution, Matt, is it's actionable. You know, so much of what we see out there is data that has, you know, data visualization that has, yeah, that looks cool, but so what, right? You know, the actionable nature of what we're looking at here is really, I think, what we're going for. You know, this is where you can actually make a difference.
And it certainly helps to start with something that is both a pain point for your users and a pain point for yourself as an analyst or a developer, because having to generate these kinds of lists I got all sorts of random requests, and I was like, all right, there's a better way to do this. I'm going to put this in your hands.
Yeah.
I think you make a really good point about the value of a single metric. And, you know, just having been working with data for a long time, it's easy to get lost in the numbers. And, you know, when there becomes, when the data is so noisy, we miss the message. And I mean, you know, obviously this is a very important topic to you. I think we all get this because we see it. We're aware of the homeless situation. But what that number, those are people.
Yes.
And that's why
Yes.
that's an important number, is because we're talking about people, individuals who are affected.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so basically, whenever I talk to anybody about BI, I will invariably say it's really about two things. It's really about aggregation and it's really about drill, right? So of course, probably all of you have that common experience. You're looking up at some total aggregated view across time and you want the ability to drill and answer questions, right? That's fundamentally what all of this work is about, the ability to aggregate and drill. So so understanding aggregation is really kind of critical to that. Like, what exactly does that mean? And so that's sort of what this topic is about. I'm going to be going through and also showing you the environment that I typically work in. So you are not going to be seeing Power BI desktop, well, a little bit. Mostly I work in, how many people work in SQL Server Analysis Services for their sort of core program? Okay, so SQL Server Analysis Services is it's very similar to desktop. It has the engines basically that allow DAX to do what it wants to do. It has the relationships between the tables. You could almost think of it as a grown-up desktop, except that's not going to be true after a while. Desktop is going to be a grown-up SSAS, but that's another topic. Anyway, so I always have open, and this is kind of really about how a person works and uses this environment, and also some really key things that I
Hey, Rich,
have.
you gotta stop.
Oh, sorry. Some key measures that I have made that are really useful, or they're patterns that I have reused again and again. So the four things are DAX Studio, which is how many of you use DAX Studio? Okay, so you're a little familiar with it. SSAS, Management Studio. How many of you are query writers, SQL coder? Okay, so I figured that a lot of that. And Excel, right? So I haven't even mentioned desktop at that point. So this is really more about getting into the guts of how you are building stuff. The next thing I'm going to also segue into is a little bit about pivot tables. And I will tell you, so the theme of this is really about group by. And we're going to start with SQL, because SQL group by is really pretty intuitive. And then we're going to say, how does that work in the world of DAX? And what is really group by doing? What is group by's relationship to pivot tables? Okay. And the spoiler is that, I mean, there are a lot of blogs out there that are great. The spoiler is, if you want to know the DAX that is kind of comparable to group by, one of the most important ones is a function called summarize. Okay, so we'll be looking a little bit about summarize. There are also functions that you would not necessarily think are group by functions, and those are the aggregator X functions. So average X, sum X. You wouldn't intuitively necessarily think they're doing a group by. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into. And the way we'll do that is sort of look at patterns, use case patterns. So the very first thing I'm going to do, now, isn't that exciting? I'm just sure all of you are excited at that topic. If this is a little bit too techy for you, I will not be insulted if you leave. We try and give a depth of, you know, a little
But
bit
Brian's
of
going to
facts.
show us something
I'm sorry,
super cool right at the
yeah,
end.
right, don't
After,
leave,
yes.
leave.
We know
I
this
miss
is
Brian.
about you.
Yes.
That's right. And I actually, so group by and SQL really couldn't be more straightforward, right? So this is a simple group by. I actually have zoom it, and if you see, if I click on this, there's, you know, this is the year that I'm just going to do a group by year. I need, of course, an aggregator, sum, right? So I want to look at sum of total sales by order date. Really straightforward. I did this very simple query. So if you run this query, and of course the important thing is group by, right? So the group by is smart enough to go and say, run out and look at all the little facts that have a sale in the year 2010, and boom, add it up. So right there, simple aggregation. Group by in SQL is so straightforward, right? I'm always kind of looking for group by. So if I were to get slightly more sophisticated, which is a more realistic way of looking at data. I mean, if you're going to look at this, I keep thinking of the camera guy. Sorry, hard for me not to move. So if you're going to look at analyzing your business, of course, you're going to look by customer, by product, etc. And by the way, any of you using quick measures? So it's a good thing because quick measures are confusing. One of the things that they're trying to do in quick measures, they do this thing called categories. They're trying to say, okay, of course we're going to assume that if you want to analyze anything about your business, that you're going to be wanting to say, show me sales, show me cost, buy something, right? I mean, very standard thing. So in SQL, if I wanted to look at customer, this is based on AdventureWorks. Because we don't want to put Columbia Sportswear data up, we had to use AdventureWorks. And it is, and basically it's a fact table and dimension tables. This is again a very simple query. Basically all you're seeing here is the same query, sum of the extended amount, which is the sales amount, running by, group by, last customer, last name. And all of these joins are just about, I want to do a filter so we don't have to look at a million people, right? So I'm going to be looking at people in pivot tables, and there's a small subset of people I'm choosing. So I'm choosing calendar year 2013 and the region Northeast. Really straightforward, right? This is going to give me useful information. These are the customers I have. Pay attention to Serrano, we'll be coming back to him. But basically, this is looking at the total sales for all of these individuals. One of the things that you always have to be thinking about when you're designing dimensional models, when you're talking to people about models, when you're building DAX, is granularity, right? So what is the granularity of a table that I'm looking at? So can anybody take a guess if in the fact table, the granularity is a customer sale? Actually, it's kind of awkward to put you on the spot. The answer is no. The granularity is going to be at the lowest level. It's not just going to be at the level of a sale. So when I say granularity, I mean there is one row per sales order. But not just one row per sales order. There's one row per sales order line item, right? That's the lowest level granularity. Why do we want that granularity? Because somebody is going to want to drill all the way down to the order line items. So you're always building in any dimensional model from the most detailed facts up, which is a good reason that you have the kind of scalability that Chris was talking about, right? Especially when you have products like Chris's, which are every sleeve length is a different SKU, and you've got to be rolling it up, right? So this
rolling up your sleeves?
Exactly. So this is, so that, anyway, those are those customers. And to prove to you that it is adding up actually from a lower level of granularity, Mr. Serrano has $50 worth of order. If I run him, clearly that's going to add up to 50. But you see what I did here in SQL. Very straightforward. I said, you know, give me, can everybody see it? Because I can make it a little bigger. You know, give me last name, sales order, line number. But I want you to group it by last name, sales order, line number, right? That's a very standard SQL thing, okay? So, because we love SQL, that's really great. But, so the question is, if you want to sort of say, what does this look like in the actual world of dimensional modeling? I'm going to hop over to a pivot table. So this pivot table is exactly those same guys, okay? This pivot table is, make the field well a little smaller. Really total sales is just sum of extended amount. That's the only DAX, right? These are just the customer sales for Northeast, and 2013 is hidden on the screen. And so that's great, and I can sort of see, I can basically say, and I think I would actually welcome anybody who wants to challenge it, a pivot table is just one big honkin' group by engine, right? It does a bunch of group buys, and the cool thing is, it sort of has no limits to how it can group by. So if I wanted to, for example, add education on here, right? I could add that over onto the pivot table, and there's yet another group by, right? So it's extraordinarily rich, and I don't know how that engine works, but that was the beauty of pivot tables. It does this, really powerful group by stuff. So, and by the way, to ensure you that it's doing that same kind of thing, we move box, and you can see that you actually, box, you've got to move. Yeah, really.
Bad
What are you
box.
thinking? What it really wants is delete box. Yeah, that's a good idea. What it really wants is me to do what Brian does, which is actually just do another tab. Okay, so here you see there is the sales order, so that's the granularity of the, right? And all I did literally was put those onto the, so fabulous, group by SQL, group by, so why would I ever need a DAX function that does group by? I have pivot tables, and if you think of pivot tables as one big group by, you can also think of Power BI Desktop and Power BI as one big set of pivot tables, right? I mean, it's kind of an exaggeration, but every visual is doing that same kind of grouping and aggregating, right? So why would I ever need a function that does any kind of grouping? Silence in the room. That's exactly what I was hoping for. So,
Because you want to iterate over them.
oh yes, that is, just for the pleasure of iterating.
Yes.
It's already iterating, right? I mean, this is what it's done. It's iterated, its little group by has iterated over Mr. Raj's, sales and added them up. But you're onto something, Paul, because the reason you have to have group bys is you can't do subqueries. Now, how many of you do subqueries in SQL?
Correlated?
Correlated subqueries. And just because correlated is fun to say, I actually don't know what it means. I know subquery, but I'd love to say how many of you do correlated subqueries. Anyway, of course, so subquery is really important in SQL, right? So I'm going to give you a case scenario. I do not want to look at total sales. I want to look at average customer sale. So the intuitive thing would be to say, okay, I'm going to go actually look at, I'm just going to add average sale. So average sale, that is just, you can see it here. It's literally just average of sale extended amount, right? So that's just average sale. So I'm thinking, okay, because really what I'm after is what I want is, if I was just in a world that I didn't have DAX or anything like that, I had a pivot table and I wanted to know the average of those numbers, I would just click over that and look in the corner, right? And I would see that it's 777, if I could get this to work, sorry. That number, trust me, is the average is 747, right? That's okay, that works for me. That is the average customer sale of this particular Northeast 2013 selection of data. The problem is at the bottom it says 4,483. That's not gonna get me, it's not, so that's clearly not gonna help me out. So if I said, let's try average sale. So I go over here and I put average sale on the customer and I see, okay, this is their total sales, this is their average sale. Now remember, there's finer granularity, so the average sale is basically on what they did on a single sales order, a sales order line. But this 172 is not 747, right? I mean, so that's not going to work. And why am I getting the 172? It all comes back to granularity, right? If I go down to the lowest level of granularity, which is, here is the sales order, and here's the sales order line item, and I hit and I go over here, and I hover in the bottom of the corner. You just have to believe me. it's 172, right? So it is telling me the average sale for every line in that fact table, right? It went up and added them all up and divided by every single line. That is not the average customer sale. That is a disappointing experience for me. So I need something that is going to give me the average customer sale. Now, how am I going to do that? So in SQL, basically, you're going to have to do what?
Group.
You're going to have to make 2 passes, right? You're going to have to go through and do the first pass where you say, go out and get me all the customers and get me the total sum on there. And then you're going to have to say, now get an average. So you're doing a subquery, which is it a correlated one, Ron?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's a relief. So if I wanted to do so here is my correlated. Can everybody say that? Correlated. Okay, so here is my correlated subquery. So here's my inner pass, which was just that one. Literally simple. I'm filtering to the year, northwest. They've got all these nasty joins just because the year is where it lives on the date table and the territory, the region lives on the territory. But basically you could ignore all that and say, she selected by customer, grouping by last name. Do that for me first and then give me the average of that, right? So it had to do this inner query and then do that outer query. Does that make sense? You guys are tracking? Mm-hmm. So how would I actually do that in DAX, right? I mean, and a couple of other things. When I run this, oops, I didn't mean to gave it away, sorry. When I run this, right, it is returning a table, right? It's not returning a scalar. How many times in a DAX function that you're using in Power BI are you returning a table? Don't answer that. And like literally, and you could have not a table inside your function. How many times do you return a table?
Every time.
Every time? Is that what you said? Well, shoot, you should go to the back of the room. I would not have answered that. I mean, maybe you're right, but mostly you're returning scalars, right? You're returning some one number. It is, now it's true that if I was in the pivot table, for example, if this is what you were meaning, what I was referring to is when I look at cell B5, I'm returning a function, average sales, that is just a scalar number, right? I may be returning a table as a whole. But generally, I want my DAX to return a scalar number, right? But however, when I'm doing that subquery, what I end up getting is what I wanted, which is I want that 747. That is the average customer sale for Northeast, right? So how do I do that in DAX, right? Okay, so we've been in Management Studio. You guys are probably familiar with that. This is Visual Studio, where the DAX is written. I'm actually not going to spend much time there, but you know, tables, DAX, etc., very similar to desktop. And but now I'm going to go into, well, actually, let me go back into Excel for a moment. So if I go and get average customer sale, which is on this tab, I get the 747. So so whatever I'm doing it right. Which kind of surprised him. But actually, no, so there's the 172, there's 747. So clearly this is working right. So what I'm telling you is nothing I figured out on my own. This is a pattern, okay? And it's a pattern. The only thing that I brought to the equation is that I thought of a way to remember it, basically, which is average. So this is specifically, I'm talking about the average X aggregator. But the pattern is average or sum X or average X or any of those X functions with values. So how many of you have ever used values as a function? Values is like this mystery goddess. I mean, I know that a lot of people who think calculate is mysterious. Values can do about like basically everything, and it'll confuse you along the way. However, if you warm up to values, it's an extremely powerful function. So now I'm jumping to DAX Studio. Why would I jump to DAX Studio? I have my DAX in my model, basically. I'm expose it into my pivot table. I have Management Studio. Any idea why I would use another tool called DAX Studio to do some investigation about a formula?
You can return a table with DAX.
Exactly. If you think of it, for those of you who use Management Studio a lot, DAX Studio is a way of unpacking what you screwed up. Basically, you can go, and so ignore this for a second. You can go, in a way, you can write a query in DAX Studio. You can't do that against a tabular model. You can't write a query in Management Studio easily against a tabular model. You have to use DAX Studio. DAX Studio is a free tool, extremely cool, not hard to learn. And so this on the left-hand side is my model, and this is some stuff that I have prepared for you. But DAX Studio is, I can't say enough for why you should be friendly to it. So this is not exactly the pattern average X values. This is the actual formula for actual customer sales, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. I actually want to hide this for a moment. So values, actually, let me scroll down for a second. Values will return, let's see if I can find it where I put it. Here we go. If I run this, anyone going to tell me what it's going to do?
Give you every customer name.
Exactly. It's going to do a stink count of all the customers. So it's a little bit like, and the thing is about this, it's going to do it for the given filter context that I'm in. So it's going to go and say, Brian asked for a report for Northeast for, 2013. Remember that and give me the customers that qualify for that. So if you evaluate is like the SQL in DAX Studio, you hit evaluate, boom, there's all the customer names. That's all it's doing. The average X, this actual formula, average X values, is going to say, okay, I want you to do a subquery for me, right? I want you to go out and get all these guys' names. And then I want you to go get the total sales, and we'll have more to say about that in a moment, the total sales, and put them, whatever that customer's name total is. And then I want you to take the average of all of that, right? So it's doing exactly what it did in SQL Server that I showed you in Management Studio. It's doing a subquery. We don't tend to think of the average X's and the X as useful for doing subqueries, but that's exactly what's happening, right? So here it is. I've got this average customer sale. And for the really experienced guys in the room, like I guess I'm going to call on Matt. Can you tell me why I decided to make that a measure there?
I'm not totally sure. My guess is it has to be context transition.
Yes, exactly. He's the guy that's corrected me a million times when I've forgotten context transition. So I know this is a little deep for those of you who are new, but basically, for those of you that are struggling with DAX on some level, when you're doing a function like this, you've got the values. This is doing an iteration over each of these names. Iterators have a row context. They get a row context. That means they know where they're sitting in relationship to the rest of the thing that's on the row. They don't have a filter context. So what happens is, by virtue of using an expression, this is actually the sum of total sales, it's smart enough to say, to assign a filter context. And that is what's called context transition. That's just a touchstone for those of you guys who are familiar with it. And you can see that here, that the reason it works is because basically you put a calculate on that function. So that's just a little tip for those context transition hungry people. So anyway, that is an extremely powerful formula. And I want to show you pattern. I want to show you in Excel. Well, I showed you that it worked. But that's not that interesting to see average customer sale by customer, right? Where it gets interesting is if I pivot it to look by region, right? Oh, we have another box. So if you look by region, right, this is saying, Australia had not only the highest sales, but it also had the highest average customer sales. And so I think that's a little bit funky that people in Australia are also buying the most expensive things. But presumably there are companies that have, have distribution there or whatever. So obviously the average customer sale is a really interesting thing when you can do it by region or education or whatever. And if you move this away, you'll see that actually this one is sorted highest to lowest average customer sale. This one is highest to lowest total sales. And you see these two switch places. So not really necessarily that exciting, but to say average X values is incredibly useful and powerful. And the second example that I'll show you is average monthly sales. So this is has a little bit more to it, but it's a really good thing to expose you to. So average monthly sales, actually what I'm going to do is the same formula, but it's doing something different here. It's for that, instead of just giving me values of customer, it does this cross-join function. So let's have a look at what this cross-join function does. And this is why you'll want DAX Studio. I could have given that formula out of a book, put it on a screen, would have no idea what that cross-join function, which is effectively what it's trying to aggregate, it's effectively the group by, what is that returning to me? So instead, I just pull it out, evaluate, boom, run it, and it's got January 2010, February 2010. It's got every single possible combination of month and year. So what it does is it goes and gets, tell me the average monthly sale, tell me the total monthly sale for this year and this month, and then average them all up. And I tell you, I use this a lot. Specifically, I'll give you in Power BI Desktop, so this is not the most exciting, I'll just spotlight this, visual. But so if I've got a customer who's looking, or somebody who uses this as their dashboard, and so this is selected for just this year, they can eyeball that, but it's it really doesn't tell them how are we actually doing. If I put a card on there of average customer sale and then a slicer, they can see in the first quarter we were doing 0.8, in the fourth quarter we've grown a lot, right? So that average customer sale is basically going to say for whatever period somebody chooses, average monthly sale, right? What was the average monthly sale across that? I use these cards a lot, average patient visits, average, but you have to do that subquery, right? So that's why average X values is extremely powerful. There's a great blog on that as well that I can share with you. But most of what you'll read about in the literature is not the average X's or the sum X's. Most of what you'll read about is the summarize, right? Summarize is kind of one of my least favorite functions, sadly. And it really doesn't maybe deserve that, but the thing about summarize is, first of all, they tell you this is what you have to do, and then they say it doesn't work very well. So, okay. Summarize is, and plus, I got to kind of bitch about why do they call it summarize? I mean, if I was Microsoft, I would have called it group by. I mean, now there is another function called group by, but why and my friend Seb thinks, well, they just sort of ran out of stuff, and they summarize. Okay, fine, whatever. But what summarize does is it does effectively the same thing. The syntax is different, right? So it says, oh, there was something else I wanted to show you. What is really interesting to me always, so look at this. This is hitting the customer table. So values on the customer table, like, I didn't trust that, right? I thought if I'm going to really be querying the sales table, I better use the sales table and like the customer key. But the customer last name lives on the customer table. And of course, okay, they should follow down because it's got the right relationships, but I didn't totally trust it. But that's, that's pretty interesting fact about that. It's talking to a dimension when usually we're kind of with our facts talking more on the fact table. But anyway, that's an aside. So summarize, same thing. It's going to the customer dimension. It's saying, I want you to basically group by the last name. It lets you put in, okay, what's the alias title that you're going to have, and I'll show you how that runs, and then what's the actual expression that I'm evaluating, right? So there it is, total customer sale, right? So very, basically doing exactly what we did, what we saw as the guts of the average, it's doing that first inner query. You will use this a lot. However, best practice is these two lines you're not really supposed to use. So the best practice, and this has to do with the way the DAX engine works, it has to do with performance, is to use add columns plus summarize, okay? Summarize is going to give you that query, and what you're seeing here, it looks a lot like what we just saw, but in this case, summarize is just this section, total cost sale is the add columns, and the aggregation is total sales. Again, in the weeds, but something you should know about if you run into performance issues with summarize. But also, look at what I'm doing. I am just now querying, I'm just returning tables. You know, summarize, is that going to work for me as a scalar? You know, is that going to return what I need, that 747? When you're in DAX Studio, the first thing to do to get that 747 was I had to have filters, right? So here's the guts of that formula, add column, summarize, blah, blah, blah. If I want to see, if I want to sort of apply a filter context, so I want to pretend somebody's sitting there choosing 2013, how do I do that in DAX Studio? What I do is I do this calculate table function. I say, okay, guess what? This is now my table. Now filter it down to these two things, okay? So another pattern you're going to use a lot in DAX Studio is I want to test, I want to go and say I wasn't even building, or let's say I was trying to reconcile why something is wrong in my Power BI desktop tool. This will let me go and query against the tabular model for specifically what they've asked for, right? So you're really going to want to know how to do this kind of thing. Calculate table, first parameter it takes is a table, and then the filters. So if we look at this one, we should get our guys back right now. I wasn't able to get rid of the blanks. I tried a number of tricks, but we'll talk to you about that, Brian. But anyway, those are the ones that are you know, in that region, right? But it's still not returning a scalar to me. If you're in DAX Studio and you want to see a scalar, you add this other thing which is called row. Evaluate row. You give you give a name to your expression, and then you can run it, and it will return 747. So, thank you. Exactly. So the point is, this is exactly analogous to what we did in SQL Server, right? We're doing basically correlated subqueries, right? You run that query, and then you do something on top of it. Group by is a function I'm not going to show you. It is a function in DAX. You use it to actually take another layer of grouping on top of it. A few things that you can also do with summarize, you can do, if you're doing a query, you can actually return that table and do a roll-up that summarizes the rows. So start to think about it as a full grade, you know, equivalent to SQL Server Management Studio, you know, ability to write queries there, okay? So basically, do I want to say anything else? Just a second. See if there's anything else to say. No, I think that was it. Oh yeah, I just wanted to show you, here's the average customer sale. This is the same thing with average customer sale using the summarize, right? So you can use them equally. I know, but the last thing I wanted to say, cases where you would use this, there are plenty of times where you will have, you will want to roll up, just as I think you were doing it, rolling up by the client ID. So he has a view that has multiple rows for every client. He's rolling up by the client ID. You would want to do this when, you would want to do a summarize by a client ID that has multiple rows, right? The other time you want to do it is, Matt's favorite thing in the world is if you have what's called a slowly changing dimension. So what that means, if you're tracking on your clients when they get married and they change their name, that's what's called a slowly changing dimension. You're keeping history so that you can see what they bought under that name and under the new name. You are going to want to have something like this that goes back and truly identifies in the summarize. You're going to want to have it summarized by the actual customer ID, not by the most recent key. So that is not like a thrilling note to end on, but that's what I'm going to end on. So So you could all breathe a little oxygen. Anyway, thank you very much.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there a way where you could summarize by the current context of the page? For example, you had the card over there, right? And
Yeah.
you had, let's say you had a chart that you could drill down on. So if you summarize by the current context, the moment you drill down, the card doesn't show the right values for the new context.
If you summarize by the current context, well, it's filtering, so that card is going to be sensitive to any changes in the filter context. Is that what you're wondering about? That will be responsive to changes in the filter context, right? Unless I, for some reason, make it so that it doesn't respond.
I think in your example, you were hard coding filter values.
Oh yeah,
just as a demonstration.
No,
yeah.
yes. You would not hard code Northeast 2013 ever, right? No, you would be. I was just hard coding that to sort of limit the number of people that were pulled back. Is that what you're asking? Not exactly.
Not really, but I'll come find you later.
Yeah, do find me. So.
All right, well, thanks, Rachel. You can understand why we call her Daxy DYER.
That's right.
Next up, Brian Grant, and he's got a really quick thing. Brian has been, I would say, on a creative, innovative surge lately. Last couple weeks, man, he's been cranking out content and solutions faster than I can even read his blogs. So he's got a little cool M tool that he's going to share.
Yeah, so this should be a pretty good code, a nice way to sort of end the evening. By the way, how's everybody doing? We're still good?
We're warm.
Warm. Okay, so I turned up the heat earlier just to make sure everybody was nice and sleepy by the end of it. Right, now I have a real challenge to make sure everybody's doing good. Okay, hey, I can't see that. Where'd the thing go? The button. So I wanted to find the sound on YouTube, so maybe somebody else can do a good job. Like, has this ever happened to you? Do you guys know the infomercial thing that you run into? Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing bulk renaming of columns using an M function that I built for you. So you don't even have to know how it works. You just have to press the button. That's how cool this is going to be. Okay, so let's go look at our problem. And because we now have hotkeys in Power BI, we're going to do it the cool kid way with hotkeys. Okay, so we want to go look at our queries, right? So I'm going to do Alt, and so I get the little letters up there at the top, H, and Q for the query editor. And I hit Enter. Right, there we go. Oh, by the way, let me shrink the resolution so y'all can see it a little better. Display settings.
Is this blog post already up on YouTube?
Yeah, this is. So like you guys can see, you guys can determine whether I did a better job tonight or before, or you can just rewatch it again. So this same basic thing is up there, right? Okay, you all can see that okay? Good. Oh yeah, we want to keep those. Okay, let's go find the query editor. Okay, so has this ever happened to you? Wherein you've got a situation where you're loading data from something like AdventureWorks, right? And if you look at the column names, it's like customer key, geography key, customer alternate key, first name. There's no spaces between the words, right? And if you take a class from somebody like us, we'll tell you, hey, what you should do, this is going to be customer facing. You should have spaces between each one of these things, right? And so all you have to do, it's very simple, is you click on this one. Let's see, hold on. You double click on it, and you add a space. Then you double click on this one, and you add a space.
And that's why you take the time to come out.
That's right.
For these tips, right?
This is just thrilling right here. So you can imagine, this is a pretty boring way to spend an afternoon, right? You know you should do this. I know I should do this. This is kind of awful to have to do this. Right?
Afternoon, this is like 3 a.m.
Yeah, right. And it's like, it's not even satisfying. When you're done with it, it's not like you solve some hard problem. You just, you hit the space bar a bunch of times.
Brian, are you saying you've got a better way?
I wish I did. Sorry, the lecture's over. Y'all can go home. So if you come up here to look at the code that we're generating, right? Let me zoom in here. What we're doing is we're actually generating, we've got this table.rename columns, and it goes and says, hey, go get the last step, and what I want you to do is change the name of a bunch of columns, okay? And what we do is we create a list of lists, 4, right? Boom. Oh God, I shouldn't have done so many of these things. That looks just like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time we double click on a column, right, and we change the name of it, it adds an item to this list. And so this big list says, hey, what are all the changes you want to make? And each little list inside of it is, what's the old name? What do you want to change the new name to, right? I want to change this name to this name. Oh, the camera person hates me. Sorry. But that makes sense, right? Okay, so what we would like is a way to automate this. So we have a tool to do that for us. So we zoom out, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just uncheck this step right here. I'm going to create a new query, right? And I'm going to be a cool kid, so I'm going to do Alt-HN, right? And then I'm going to press the up button to do twice to get to blank query. I'm going to hit enter. So now I got this new blank query. And I'm going to call it a meaningful name. Meaningful name. I went all day to do that. Meaningful name. Okay.
With the space, man.
With a space. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, don't you have a tool for that?
I should have a tool for that, right? Okay, and so now what we want to do is we want to paste some code that I've pre-written into this tool, right? So we're going to go to the advanced editor, and I'm actually going to use the mouse to make life a little easier for folks, right? So I'm going to click right there on advanced editor. It's Alt HQ for anybody taking notes. We're going to pop over to Notepad, and this is on our website, so you guys don't have to take a picture of it. Just go to our website, it's on our blog, it's all right there. You just copy this whole darn thing, Control-C, or Control-A, Control-C to copy it, head back over here, and select all that stuff, and just write over it, okay? So now when we hit done, we have this new function right here. So all we got to do is say, hey, what table do we want to clean, right? I want to clean dim customer, and when I hit invoke, what I actually get is some text. That's an M script, right? And so what it's done is it's created that list of lists where I get every single, let me zoom in. It's got every single old name with every single new name, right? So now all I got to do is just take this whole thing right here, like that, copy it, I head over here to dim customer. I'm just gonna, let me zoom in so you can see it a little better. I'm gonna add a dummy step, insert step after. Oop, there we go. Okay, so now we've got this step. And the step's basically got nothing, and so what I'll do is I'll just click here right after my last step. I'll hit Control-V to paste all that code in. And I come up here all the way to the top, and here where it says, your last step name goes here, put your last step name there, okay? So DBO customer, or Control-X. And I write over it just like this. And when I do, boom, all of my column names are cleaned, okay?
Woohoo!
Yay! So, other nice things about this. Let's say that I want to make some customization to say, hey, for most of these I want that to be the rule, but let's say for the first customer key for some reason, I want key to have a couple exclamation marks after it or something like that. Or let's do it like this. Key. For whatever reason I want to make that change, right? This makes it very easy to go in and customize these things, okay? So I just go ahead, hit enter, and boom, it changes just like that. And if I want to know what my changes are, I've got this nice, well-formatted list here that I can look through. I can copy and paste this and send it to somebody in an email, right? Very handy like that. Other really nice thing about this, does this query fold? Oh, sure it does. There we go, view native query. So it could pass all of this logic back to SQL Server. So it doesn't have to load all the data to make these changes. It can do it all at the server layer.
You need to do a new YouTube series called Does It Fold?
Does it fold?
Right. In the style of Does It Blend?
That's right, yeah.
Well,
That's a good
you
one.
learn at an early age, you got to know when to fold.
You got to know when to fold them and know when to hold them.
When to walk away.
Yeah, when to walk away.
All right, that's it. That's all I got. Any questions?
So we were talking afterwards. I just wanted to mention that it would be really easy
Yes.
to customize the logic in your function to handle underscores and dashes and whatever else you have in your data.
Yeah, that's probably a change I want to make. So there's a version up there, but you can also just easily take the code that's there and hack it yourself. They would both totally work. Yeah,
this is
that's a really
awesome.
good idea.
This is like one of the best things you've done. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, we've done it again. Thanks to our speakers.
Yep.
Rachel, Brian. Do we need Rachel up here more often?
Yes.
And remember, if you guys have community presentations that you want to give for next month or the subsequent months, just let me know. Email me, Greg P at CSG Pro, or reach out on the Portland community page. Thanks
So
a
we'll
lot.
see you back next month, exactly the same time, same place.